Hi there. Today I'm here with Ran Isenberg. Ran Isenberg is from Israel. He is a AWS hero. He is a software engineer and an open source contributor. And I'm very excited to talk to you about everything AWS has to offer, his open source projects, and his daily work. Ran, how's it going?
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being here. So I mentioned it. You are known for a consultant for AWS. What brought you to that space?
So my day job is mostly being a principal software architect at CyberArk, which was, fun fact, was acquired by Palo Alto Networks very recently. And I work there as part of the platform engineering division. And I also do consultant work on the side a bit. And like you mentioned, I'm an AWS serverless hero. I'm a public speaker, and I maintain a couple of open source projects, which one of them is about to celebrate 1 million downloads next month.
Well, that's huge. That's huge. Congratulations
Thanks.
on that. So you mentioned platform engineering, and I think not everyone listening to this podcast knows what exactly that is. Could you briefly explain what it's about?
Yeah, so I think it's like another level of DevOps. Like we're all doing DevOps to some degree, especially when in the serverless world. I think even developers are doing DevOps. But I think it's more than that. It's more than hey, let's automate our deployments and build our Jenkins pipelines and have monitoring. It's about treating it as a product. Like we can provide you a self-service platform, a developer portal, whatever, where you get your deployments, your monitoring, all the best practices built in. Basically, our team, our division is meant to help the organization move faster, reduce waste. By waste, I mean the teams are building the same things over and over again, like thinking about security, CI/CD pipelines, observability, authentication, authorization, tenant isolation. These are all things that we as a SaaS provider, every product that we have, we need it. So instead of having everybody build it and have different implementations and maybe even wrong solutions, the idea here is to have a team, dedicated team that basically takes care of all the things that you need in your SaaS, in your organization, in your services, and treats it as a product, maintains it, and makes sure it's unified and makes a good developer experience for the other services and they are built using our tools, our artifacts, services, libraries, whatever we build, and they use it to deliver value faster to the external customers, paying customers of our company.
Yeah, so it's basically a set of building blocks that I, as a developer, can use to bootstrap a new project in an organization and have everything connected. Is it that how to think about that?
I think it's even more than that, because yes, it's part of that. So you have all sorts of aspects, artifacts or products that we've built. So you have the self-service portal, right? The automation that we've built. And AWS actually wrote a case study about us, about CyberArk, how we reduced the time to create a new service from 25 weeks into 3 hours and saved over $1.5 million thanks to that project, which was a huge project that many people worked on. So that's one aspect. But the outcome of it's not just about the automations, it's also about the libraries that we've created for tenant isolation, for observability, having built-in dashboards out of the box, logging as libraries. It's things that are not just automations, it's actually things that are running in runtime in the code of the services. And also you have, and I think something that is unique to CyberArk, I guess, is that we also cater for external customers. So we have our developers, our internal customers, and we also have our external customers, the paying customers of CyberArk. And by that, I mean that you can basically, let's say that you have a couple of services that are required to provide an audit interface, UI, to the customers. An audit is like a log that they can see, and it's a very special log that's like a law binding law, whatever. Now, instead of having all the services, all the teams build the same service all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is basically like you do when you refactor a code, you take a function that is a code that is being used all over the place, you refactor it into one function. It's basically what we did. We took this service, this capability, turned it into a platform service. So not just automations, not just SDKs, like a service, a customer-facing service. And we took all the requirements from all the teams and we built the audit service. So that means that now customers can see audits in a unified UI from all the CyberArk's internal services and all the things they're doing in the system. So we cater for one perspective to the external customers. They get a better experience in our SaaS. And we also help the developers by reducing their requirements, basically, that are not really related to their business domain. They just need to have audits. So they can send the audits to the main service and we publish it and show it to the customers.
So it's basically a higher level component on top of the cloud primitives?
Yeah, so it's like just a service that our customers can use, and the internal services can basically offload their requirements to us. So they can send us the audits and we store them, we search them, whatever. And it can be all sorts of services, not just the audit service, just an example. You have all sorts of cases like that.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And the technology behind it, is that all built on the serverless components from AWS, or is there some containerization going in there? Do you even have bare metal for some parts of the application?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're a very big company. We're over 4,000 people and over 1,000 developers. And we started the platform, I mean, it wasn't in a void. Like you already had some services. So these services were, whatever they chose. So some were Kubernetes, some were ECS, Fargate. But we decided on a golden path at the company level that new services are serverless first, meaning you're going to check and see that serverless technology, whether it's compute, database, whatever, it fits your use case. And then you're going to leverage the platform. The platform is mostly serverless services. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, yes, most of the services, especially the newer ones, like in the last 6 years, they're serverless based. But we have Kubernetes, we have ECS Fargate, we have EC2, all sorts of things.
What are some, let's say, things that people prevent using serverless? There are some fears about like exploding costs and that being not as cost efficient on hosting on bare metal. What's your take on that?
So I think, first of all, we need to define what serverless actually means, because once you do that, you realize that most of the new services at AWS, or even most of the services at AWS, are serverless. So what does serverless mean? It means that it's a managed service. You don't manage any machine, infrastructure, container. You don't need to take care of any security patches, whatever. And you pay only for whatever you use. Usually it means that also it scales down to zero, and you don't pay when it scales down to zero. So it's not like you have a machine that runs 24/7 and you pay whatever, even if there is no traffic or customer traffic that hits it. And it means that also if there's a sudden spike, it knows how to auto scale automatically. So even if you didn't configure it properly, it can still manage the spikes. And I think these are the main advantages of serverless. And it's not just about compute. Usually when people say serverless, they think, okay, Lambda function, right?
Yeah.
And not really. I mean, think about it. S3,
probably
serverless.
First serverless service from AWS. Yeah.
True. SQS, SNS, Bedrock, Agent Core. I mean, even AI now is agent, right? It's serverless. I don't manage the infrastructure of the agent. I just deploy the code and connect it to whatever I need. So even if you use Kubernetes or bare metal machines, you can still work with other serverless services. And I think it comes down to your use cases, your requirements, your traffic patterns. Does it match or not my budget? And if you plan ahead, you can see whether it matches your requirements and matches your budget or not. And I think that nowadays, even after the last reinvent that AWS added the Lambda managed instances, I think it even improves the case for serverless because it improves the cost for Lambda at a higher scale, reduces cold starts and other things. So it seems
How does that
to
work?
me, serverless has a very bright future, but it requires a shift in culture, I think.
Yeah, how does that function managing instances work? I think it's a recent addition from the reinvent, right?
Yeah, it basically means that you can get an EC2 instance and you define it to whatever your needs are, and you're going to run Lambda functions on that instance, and it's going to handle the auto scaling and the patches and the updates. But basically, it means that all your Lambda functions share this instance more efficiently. It's always there, so you have less cold starts, and it also knows how to auto scale by itself. So if you look at the cost calculator, if you have a very steady traffic where very high, like a very high load of performance is required, it's gonna be cheaper and with less cold starts. So they basically solve the case for, oh, you have a high traffic, it's gonna cost too much, go to ECS Fargate. No, now I can stay with my Lambda function and stay with whatever I know, whatever the model I have, observability, and whatever I built, and pay less, which is awesome.
Okay, so basically that means you have like an EC2 instance as an isolated environment for your own Lambda functions, right?
Yeah. So the downsides that you need to define the VPCs and all sorts of things that are not very serverless, to be honest, but you don't manage really the instance, the machine. You don't, and even the auto scale, you just define the minimum and maximum, and it's even the types. Like you can tell AWS, choose whatever type makes sense. These are my requirements. This is the ratio between CPU and memory, and you figure it out. So it's like it's basically managed. So you get that serverless experience to some degree.
Got it. So you already mentioned like S3 being the first serverless service from AWS. But arguably, one of the first class citizens is Lambda functions, right? Yeah. And you wrote an entire open source book about Lambda function, the Lambda function cookbook. So what are the main things that people might get wrong when thinking about Lambdas, or what are some use cases that people don't pay as much attention to as they should?
I think usually people are afraid of Lambda because it's different. I think it requires the developers to write DevOps code. Usually because I think serverless in general, it's like playing with Lego, because it's very event driven in nature, and you need to understand the architecture, and you're just defining all the Lego parts together. So you have API gateway, Lambda function, SQS, SNS. You connect everything together in infrastructure as code usually. And developers at first not very keen to do that, but with Terraform, CDK, Pulumi, whatever, I think it's very simple nowadays to do that, and it makes you more independent, and you can run much faster by doing that. And it's also just a different model of thought. Like everything is just different than getting an HTTP request in a container and then doing it in Lambda. And then you also have just subjective, like false information just that became like what Lambda is about, and it's not true. Like cold starts. I mean, I wrote about it, like why are we still talking about cold starts? There are so many options and ways to either mitigate that, improve that, and honestly, in many cases, it's not really an issue anyways. So I think there's a misconception about cold starts. But I will say that going serverless, especially with Lambda, requires you, it's very easy to get started.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to get it to a production grade and fully optimized, you need to understand the bits and bytes and how it works. And that is why I created the open source that I manage the AWS Lambda Handler Cookbook, and I wrote like 10 blog posts around it that explain the logic and the best practices that are implemented there. And if you take a look at the template and the logic behind what is the security, observability, tent isolation, how you do logging, how you treat environment variables, like all these things, you get a better starting point than when I started with serverless about 7 years ago, when I didn't have a good information. So I just either figured out the best practice, contributed code to open sources like PyTools for AWS Lambda, which is a highly recommended open source, by the way, and just wrote blog posts about it and started talking about it in conferences.
Where can people find it?
So just Google AWS Lambda Handler Cookbook. It will probably pop up. And also AWS PyTools for AWS Lambda. That's the major open source for basically encapsulates many best practices, utilities that you can use for Lambda functions.
Yeah, we put the links down below.
Sure, thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, you mentioned it. Like serverless architecture demands a very different mindset of approaching problems, because it's not like request in, some processing and request out. And also on the other hand, AWS itself has 200 different services or something. So for people wanting to start out with serverless or AWS, this is like an overwhelming amount of information to digest. So in your experience, what is a good start?
I think you don't really need to overthink it. Like, how did I start? You have a problem. You need to start with a problem that you want to solve. And then you need to see and tackle, like, okay, what are my options for every part of the equation? Do I need API gateway? Do I need the Lambda function? Now I need a database. Which one should I choose? For the most part, it's very easy to start with DynamoDB and only then jump to something like an Aurora database or S3 or whatever you need. But you have some very basic services like SNS, SQS, EventBridge, Lambda, API gateway. I think these are the most basic building blocks that you'll see most services that are using. And again, don't need to overthink about it. Just start with something and you'll end up adding things anyways. You'll start adding WAF, Web Application Firewall. You'll end up using S3 to some degree, whatever is the use case. And it's okay to refactor later on. I mean, you need to start with something, understand your requirements, and build from there. Or use my cookbook to play around with API Gateway, Lambda, and DynamoDB, and build from there. Then add some asynchronous flows, add SNS, add SQS, whatever you want. I mean, but these are the basic building blocks. I'd say also Cognito, if you need an identity provider, probably. Yeah. I think in most cases, these are the services that I use on a daily basis. And I think these will get you very far.
So this basically boils down to having a good example application that you want to build and then going step by step, right?
Yeah, but honestly, today it's a very different world. Like when I started, I didn't find too many examples, not a lot of blog posts. The open source community was different. I mean, it has changed dramatically, but now you also have agentic AI. So even to write the code itself, it's so much easier. I remember doing, I think almost 1 year, 1 year, like 1 year and a half ago, We gave an associate engineer like a project to summarize the bootcamp. And I remember it took them about 3-4 days to write all the code and get everything done, set up the DynamoDB, write the Lambda functions properly. And you could see that they really understood the practice, they understood what we wanted them to write and how we write things at Sabar. But then ChatGPT was just starting out, and we thought, okay, let's see if we can ask the same question for ChatGPT and see if how much time does it take it for it to get it right, to get the design right, to get everything. And it basically took like 15 minutes, and we had the same application pretty much written. So I think getting started is easier now. Getting designs, I mean, unless you're building something very complicated, you'll probably get it right with ChatGPT to get started. Just make sure you understand the code, make sure you understand the services, play with them, the console, read the logs, debug, write proper testing. I think that will get you very good into the serverless world.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned AI. We were 20 minutes in. You mentioned AI like after 20 minutes of our talk. And of course, that's the boiling topic these days. What does AWS has to offer in that space? You mentioned Bedrock, what to my understanding is quite different to their machine learning offering. So in Bedrock, you can run agents. Do they also have something like what other providers do for sandboxing?
So Agent Core, if I recall, Agent Core, Bedrock Agent Core is a new service, and I think it's a very interesting service. I think this is where the future is heading towards. So Bedrock started as a way to run LLMs. You just have an API. You select whatever LLM you want to use, and you can build some nice chatbots around it. I remember doing a blog post about it, and I wrote a chatbot on ECS Fargate. It leverages an LLM, and I wanted to see if me, like a simple serverless guy, could actually get into this AI and see if I can actually get it working. So I wrote a
How did it work out?
So I wrote it. It worked, and it's very simple, to be honest. So kudos to the Bedrock team, and also to write the ECS Fargate. It also was a first time for me because I usually use Lambda functions. And I wrote a chatbot that answers service questions and try to impersonate me. So that was kind of fun. So my point is that it's very easy, I think, to get started, but the world is also, it changes a lot because they added a new service, the Bedrock Agent Core, where you can basically run your agents. Again, it's a serverless service. You don't think about the infrastructure like I did with the Fargate ECS. You don't need that anymore. They just basically deprecated my project. And you can connect all sorts of models into it. Like you can connect identity. You can connect memory. You can connect policy. That's a new feature. And you can also connect Gateway, which is the way to add tools and MCPs and things like that. I actually wrote an open source before they started Agent Corp to support all these things. I wrote a template for running your own MCP server on Lambda function. And they basically deprecate. Yeah, but they deprecated it because Agent Core does it better, because I wrote a Lambda function that deploys fast MCP and handles all the calls for you and the authentication or whatever. They just said, you know what, we'll take it to a better serverless abstraction. I mean, you configure Agent Core.
Yeah.
You define the agent, you add the gateway, the APIs, the MCPs, whatever. It's all in configuration. It just works. You get the domain, you get the URL, and it just works. Yeah. So they basically deprecated my open source.
So that's how they end up with 200 plus services in getting those smart ideas from people building it. But I guess
they didn't get it from me, honestly. But
yeah.
they did a good job. Honestly, they did a really good job.
But does it still work what you built?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, of course it works. Of course,
Because
yeah.
I think it would be tremendously helpful in people understanding what's going on if they do it like manually instead of relying on just another service.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a use case for it. I wrote a blog post about it. Why I think it still has a place. And again, it depends on how much control you want to have on the actual code it runs and how much you want to manipulate things inside there. Maybe for security companies like us, it makes more sense. I think for regular people who just want to get something working, not sure that it's really mandatory. But for me to write it, it really helped me to understand the MCP protocol. I started by writing a parser just to understand how it works, how this magic works, and then shifted to using fast MCP once I understood it. So if you want to learn about the protocol and how it really works, yes, that's a great way to learn, to play with the actual things. But if you just want to get it working and connect your agent to your organizational Jira, Confluence, GitHub, whatever, and do it very fast and not manage anything, I think that's a no-brainer. Agent Core is no-brainer.
Yeah, I would love to link the blog post also in the show notes if you send it to me
Sure, I'll send
afterwards.
it.
That
Sure.
would be great. One last thing I want to talk about is like we talked about like beginning with AWS, and now let's assume we already did something in AWS, so we are kind of intermediate in our knowledge. So what are the first obstacles that one has to overcome when there is like a real life project, and what are the most common pitfalls here?
So do you want to? So let me understand the question. You mean like how do I start with an open, like with a project on the side, or what do you mean?
So we covered already like how to start becoming an expert in AWS, and now let's say you're on a team that already has an application on serverless on AWS.
Okay.
And what are the common mistakes people make at that stage?
Common mistakes. Wow. Okay. I think it's about misconfiguring and lack of optimizations. It can be even security mistakes sometimes, and not having the proper monitoring around when things go bad. Either you have bugs or you have some FinOps mistakes and you get spiraling and you don't know that your next day you're going to get a very interesting fine from AWS because you didn't implement the guardrails or the monitoring properly. I think it's a maturity problem. Like you can get something working, but again, the better you become on AWS, the problems that you have become much harder and of a higher degree. For example, what about when you assist one goes down? It's gonna happen, right? It happens. It happens every year, every 2 years. What it's gonna happen? Will your application work? Will it be able to move by itself to a different region? That's a different approach of engineering, right? That's a very hard problem to have. Will you even know it that it goes down in time? Do you have the proper observability? Do you have the automations around it? So again, I think it's about the next level of productization. It can be around security, governance, and when bad things happen, you need to be prepared for that. And FinOps also. I mean, many people spend a lot of money, then don't even realize that they're spending a lot of money. For example, you can set provision concurrency on Lambda functions, and you can set the value way too high or not on the correct functions. You're just spending money, or even in the incorrect environments. You don't need that in dev environment. You need that in production, and only maybe in specific regions where you have higher traffic volume. So there's all sorts of optimizations and things that you need to learn. But I think it's kind of true to any technology, not just serverless, just the solution is different in serverless.
Yeah. I remember a time where we had to set up and set down like a Redshift instance so that we only brought it up when the analytics team is using it, and we didn't pay for the weekends and the after hours. So something like this is, I mean, even AWS is encouraging you to do some sorts of that.
Yeah, and even from security perspective, like how do you know that it's properly secure? Did you configure it properly? Like how do you know that? So these are things that you think about when you get to not a POC level, even if you're in production, you need to understand that very fast. Otherwise, bad people will just abuse it.
Are there any tools that you know of that monitors an entire account for issues with FinOps or issues with overpriced resources or anything like that?
So for FinOps perspective, you have all sorts of companies that help you monitor and understand where you're spending. Sometimes they can find you. I don't remember the name. We actually use one of those. But there are companies that this is their bread and butter. They scan your environment and tell you where you have not using the EBS storage properly, or you have some orphan resources and things like that. And then you can optimize and get reports, and you can turn it into a contest in your company. Who's reducing the, who's saving the most money is going to get whatever. So it becomes like a competition. And it's about building a FinOps culture in the end. Yeah.
And what about security? Are there like
security
in traditional networking, you have something like Nmap or something? Is there like a scanner for an AWS account that actively searches for security vulnerabilities?
Yeah. So first of all, you can use CyberArk to do that, to find overly privileged resources and other issues that you have in your accounts. But let's say that even in the CI/CD stages, when you want to deploy your service, you can have all sorts of scanners like CDK NAG, and if you use CDK, but you have all sorts of scanners that can check out the output, the changes that you're about to commit to AWS, and they can actually stop the PR and tell you, hey, you're making something that is not secure, you have a problem, don't deploy it, you have a secret in your code and things like that. You have SNCC, for example. So these are things in the deployment stage, but once it's somehow you missed it, the tools missed it, you have other companies like us, like Wiz, whatever, that they can find all sorts of security hazards.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. There was a lot of information. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, sure.
So if people want to stay in contact with you, where are you active? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter? Where can people reach out?
So I have a website. It's called runthebuilder.cloud, and also on LinkedIn and Twitter, X, I guess. Yeah. So this is where I publish my thoughts, conference talks, and blog posts that I'm going to have. I post almost every 2 weeks, I think.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Ran.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
It's been a blast for me too. Thank you.
Okay.